Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Azadov's Chess Channel, and welcome to the Clutch Chess International Tournament 2020. It's again Magnus Carlsen versus Jeffery Xiong. We are now in the last round, so it's now game 12, in which Magnus Carlsen had a 2-point lead in front of Jeffery Xiong. But there is this problem about these clutch games. If Jeffery Xiong now wins the game with the black pieces, Magnus Carlsen is out of the tournament. So maybe this concept isn't the most fair concept, but it is simple like this. Everyone has agreed to play this tournament, so if, as I said, Magnus loses this game, he'll be kicked out of this tournament. So let's see now what happened. Magnus opened with the move e4, so Jeffery responded with the move c5, knight to f3, e6, and we have c3, the Alapin variation. The Alapin is maybe not the most popular of openings because it's simply sometimes too passive. You're taking away your very healthy square for a knight. But the main idea about the Alapin is to play d4 and create a pawn central control. So here Jeffery plays knight to f6, challenging the pawn on e4, so that's why e5, knight to d5, and we have now bishop to c4. So the idea behind this move is to create simply bishop takes d4 some double pawn, then rely simply on our advanced pawn, because in this particular variation our main strategical advantage is of course the advanced e5 pawn. We should really build our attack around this pawn. But in the game knight to b6 played by Jeffery, simply attacking the bishop, and we have now bishop to b3 by Magnus. So it seems that maybe a c4 move would be dangerous. That would kick away maybe the bishop. That could create also a space advantage for black, or maybe here on the fourth rank. But don't be worried when you play maybe the Alapin variation. It's not so simple for black to push this pawn, because we have simple bishop to c2, and after potential d5 we can simply take en passant after e takes d5, bishop to d6. But now we could also play d4, and now basically everything is fixed. We still have a good control of the diagonals with our bishop, so black, if castles, risks to go into maybe some Greek gift attacks. If black, for instance, castles here immediately, then bishop to h7 I think is even a possibility. Knight to g5 followed with queen to h6, h5 could cause really some troubles. So that's why black would be forced in this particular move order to play en passant, c takes d3. But now again queen to d3 is very dangerous. So you see how fast you can also develop in this Alapin variation. So that's why after the move bishop to b3, here Jeffery didn't play this move c4. He played a simple d6, cracking the position around the square e5. You have to do that in order to really get rid of this space advantage that white has created. So here Magnus supports the pawn. We have c takes d4, c takes d4, and now d takes e5. You don't want to take, of course, with the pawn, then the queens are off the board, so then the position would be simplified. I think black has a comfortable game. That's why knight to e5 played by Magnus, and we have now knight to c6. After knight takes c6, b takes c6, we have now a new position in which Magnus Carlsen has a weak isolated pawn, but also Jeffery has an isolated pawn on c6, so we have now two clear targets. But I still like a little bit more white's position, because we can also talk about weak squares here, not only about weak pawns. One of the main ideas now for white is to occupy this c5 or e5 square, maybe to cement a knight here or on c5. On the other hand, black would probably try to create sort of a blockade with knight to d5, trying to keep the position in the center compact. So these are the main strategical ideas here. And Magnus played castling here, of course, securing the king, and bishop to e7 played by Jeffery. Now knight to c3, simply developing the knight. And after castling, now comes already sort of a surprise, I think, for Jeffery. Here Magnus played the move queen to f3, of course leaving the pawn on d4 hanging, but also counter-attacking the pawn on c6. Here I think the best way for Jeffery is simply to proceed queen takes d4. After queen to c6 we can play rook to b8, and the idea is now to simply get a huge activity with this bishop on b7. But here if you even try to attack the queen, bishop to e3, queen to g4 is a common threat, and now bishop to b7 is a serious threat that Magnus has to face. After the move queen to f3, Jeffery plays, I think, an inaccuracy. He plays bishop to a6. It comes with an attack on the rook, but basically helped white out to get this rook very actively into the game. Rook to d1 would be played move by Magnus Carlsen anyway. He would have played this move anyway, so that's why you basically forced your opponent to play a move that he would have played anyway, and now the pawn on d4 is supported. Now suddenly this pawn is not the weakness anymore, it's really our strength, because this pawn now is as I said, protecting this c5 and e5 squares, so we could use this squares in order to maybe create an knight outpost. And this pawn is also preventing black to push the pawn on c5 or on e5 to crack the position in the center. So this bishop to a6 wasn't really the best of moves by Jeffery Xiong, and now he tried onto his idea to play knight to d5. You don't want to take, of course, knight takes d5, because c takes d5, then basically you have improved this pawn on c6. You don't have any more clear targets. Now there isn't any more this weakness on c6. So that's why after the move knight to d5, Magnus played knight to e4. He wants to, of course, use now this knight maybe into the attack. Here in the game, queen to b6. Jeffery finishes his development, and now we have queen to g3. Very natural my idea here by Magnus. The main threat is now to play bishop to h6. Then you're basically forced to play something like g6, as you cannot cover with the bishop on f6. You cannot protect your g7 square. You risk always this capture. Knight takes f6, and then followed with queen to g7 checkmate. So that's why Jeffery decides to simplify the position. But the problem is now for Jeffery, he needs to win this game. That's his main problem. He has to win this game, because then then it's of course worth 3 points, and by simplifications you simply force really now your opponent to go into a more drawish line, and Magnus of course will not lose these types of positions. He plays simply a very nice bishop to g5 move, forcing even more trades of pieces. Here if you take queen takes g3, it doesn't bring you so much. After h takes g3, bishop takes g5, knight takes g5. It seems that maybe black has equalized the position, but there is one problem. After potential rook to d8, we have still the possibility to get back with our knight, the knight to e4, and after a healthy move like rook to c8, we would simply cement our knight on c5. As I said in the beginning of the video, this is now a very powerful knight outpost. You cannot kick it away with some minor pieces. This bishop is of course aiming on the light squares, but it's aiming into nothing. Now we could even go into a positional trades of pieces, simply giving up our bad bishop for this very nice centralized knight. So even if Magnus doesn't have anything in this position, still it's draws. You cannot lose this game basically. But in the game after the move bishop to g5, here Jeffery didn't take the queen. He tried f6. We have bishop to d2, and now finally queen takes g3. We have h takes g3, and now bishop to d3, attacking the knight. We have knight to c3. You don't want to play knight to c5 in this position, because then bishop takes c5 will happen. That's the main problem. And now suddenly you have a weakness, because now this pawn on c5 is really an unprotected pawn. You would be forced to support it with your rook, and still this is a very powerful knight. It cannot be attacked anymore by some other knight, so you would be forced maybe to give up your light square bishop, but then risk a new position, which we would have a light square bishop against a dark square bishop. So again, sort of a drawish position. So in the game, knight to c3, that's why played by Magnus, so not knight to c5. Here Jeffery tried rook to c8. He wants really to improve the position of this weak pawn on c6, and now Magnus played rook to c1, competing on the c file. We have king to f7, because c5 wasn't a possibility. Immediately you risk knight takes d5, followed with bishop takes d5, the fork on the rook and the king. So that's why here king to f7 had to be played, and now a knight to a4, again by Magnus, getting used now finally of this c5 square, because after now potential knight takes c5, you don't have to take with the pawn. You can also recapture with the rook, still continuing the pressure against this weak pawn on c6. So in the game, bishop to b5, now comes this move, knight to c5. We have bishop takes, rook takes c5, knight to b6, and now rook to e1, played by Magnus. Simple target, of course, it's the weak pawn on e6. Here Jeffery tried rook to e8, but now this shows really the skills of the world champion. Rook to a1. You see how this rook moves all over the board, now creates a new threat. It's the move a4. In the game, rook to d8 was played by Jeffery. Now comes the move a4. And here is the critical moment of the game. Jeffery played bishop to c4, which was a mistake. But this is a lost position anyway for Jeffery, because even if you take rook takes d4, this is the problem. You get simply bishop to e3. First they attack on the rook. If you try rook to b4 to counter attack, then you get simply bishop takes e6. First a check you have to take, and now after a takes b5, the problem is that you cannot take the pawn, because you get simply rook to c6. If you move with the king, we have simply rook takes b6, and you lose the rook on the a file. So in this particular position, you would be forced to play something like knight to c4. So you would be forced to get out of the range, and then white can simply continue with b takes c6, grabbing another pawn and create a pass pawn. So even rook takes b5 is not a possibility here, because we have rook takes b5, and after c takes b5, again the same tactical threat on the a file, bishop takes b6, and again it's game over. So here Jeffery had really some choices, but every choice is, I think, bad. Here in the game, after the move a4, he tried bishop to c4. Even bishop to a6 is a problem, as you get simply rook takes c6, again with an attack on the e6 pawn, but also with the threat to play the move a5. If the knight moves somewhere, then you simply lose the bishop. So even if you try something like rook to d4, then you have bishop to c3, first counter attack on the rook. If the rook retreats, then a5. You lose simply a piece. If you move the knight, you lose the bishop. If you try bishop to b7, then you get first checked. If you try to cover with the rook, then we can simply take again a takes b6, and the rook is protected. So great tactics that Magnus has prepared here. Really nice attack. As I said, in the game, Jeffery tried bishop to c4. We have bishop takes c4, rook takes d4, but again comes this very nice threat, a5. The problem is, if you take like Jeffery did in the game, then here Magnus pulled off some great tactics. You can pause the video and try to find really the winning move. It's a great move that Magnus Carlsen has found here. Here Magnus played a very nice rook sacrifice, great endgame technique. A takes b6, because if you take in this position, Xiong resigned. He saw this tactics. If you take rook takes c5, then you have rook takes a7. It comes with a check, so basically you're forced to trade off the rooks. After a takes b7, b takes a7. The problem is that you cannot go with your rook behind this pawn, as the bishop is covering this very important a5 square. So great game played by Magnus. Really incredible tactics that he saw in this fast time format. He really outplayed his opponent. I'm glad that he didn't go really into too much drawish line. He wanted to compete. He wanted to really challenge now Jeffery Xiong. Show me what you got. If you want to win this game, you have to win in a great tactical battle. Here Jeffery lost, but I think he played some good games against the world champion. Now is out of the tournament. In the second semifinals, Wesley So won the match game against Maxim Vachilagrav. So I think we'll have again the same semifinal, Wesley So against Magnus Carlsen. Wesley So had his chances against Magnus in the Lindori's Abbey Rapid Challenge, so we'll see. This will be, I think, a great match game. So congratulations to Magnus. Great game, great 12th game. It was really a pleasure to watch. I think it's with some great tactics. If you want to see more games from this tournament, you can also check out my commented chess games. Here's the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.